The big, beautiful bill, can it pass by the 4th of July? Former Congressman and White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney breaks it down in under 60 seconds.
If things sort of go per plan, the Senate would pass something, I don't know, Sunday, Monday, and the House would try to force it through as quickly as they possibly can. With every day that the Senate slides to the right, the chances of passing things before the 4th go down because the House really wants to go on vacation. And again, the 4th of July deadline is a made-up deadline. It's a Trump deadline. It's not a hard deadline. The bill is going to count just as much passing it on the 11th of July as it does on the 4th of July. Still, they want to get it done. So if the Senate moves quickly, and you and I both know there's a lot of things the Senate doesn't do, and one of them is move quickly, but if they do, you might still be able to get it passed by the 4th.
All right, guys, I am so excited for today's episode. Happy Friday. We're rolling into the weekend and then sort of a holiday week. It's 4th of July week. It's on the end of the Friday. So this is going to be it'll be interesting. Anyway, I'm excited for today's show for two reasons. One, yesterday, Karoline Leavitt, you heard her saying she expects the big, beautiful bill on the president's desk before the 4th of July. The Senate's got to go to a vote-a-thon this weekend and the House would have to take it and go for it. Okay. Mick Mulvaney, former White House Chief of Staff and founding member of the Freedom Caucus in the House of Representatives, is about to join us and give us his take. Is that possible? What are the hurdles? How does this go down? Insight that you're not going to get from anyone else. Because again, Mick has seen it from the White House side, from the House Freedom side, and obviously, so this is something you're not going to see anywhere else. And then, by the way, I've got an amazing guest coming your way. I stumbled upon this book a little while ago. It's called The Media Vs The Apprentice. It's by a professor named Alberto Martinez. He's down at the University of Texas, Austin. He donated money to Bernie Sanders. I say that because he's not a Trump, but he cares about the truth and the media coverage of how Donald Trump has been covered. Guys, I'm telling you this right now. You will not see Professor Martinez out anywhere else. Not on CNN, not on MSNBC. I'm going to bring you an interview that you will not see anywhere else. Trust me when I say this, and it'll blow your mind what he's put in this book. He breaks down every media narrative with facts and history in a way. And I'm talking all of the hoaxes, all of the BS narratives. Trust me, you will see this and just have your mouth on the floor and say, I'm going to send it to 10 friends. It's that good. I've been so excited to have him on this week with the CNN and New York Times BS stories about Intel. I had to get him on. Trust me when I say this. So first I'm going to bring in Mick Mulvaney to talk about Big Beautiful Bill and then Professor Martinez. Before we get there though, next week is the 4th of July. The folks at Tax Network USA are about to do us all a huge favor. If you have unfiled, unpaid taxes, or you know someone, a family member, a friend, a coworker has been telling you, I'm behind the curve on the IRS, this is your signal. Get it done. Tax Network USA, 10% across the board on all their services. And when I tell you this right now, Tax Network USA are the best in the business. The IRS is going to come after you. The full force of the government to garnish your wages, to put liens on your stuff. They know what they're doing and they don't care how much it is or how much paperwork you almost are there with. They're coming after you. Get professional help if you are one of these people or you have a friend or a colleague that is in this boat, unfiled, unpaid taxes. These guys are the best in the business. They know exactly who to talk to at the IRS and who not to. They've got a preferred direct line. And like I said, it's never too late to help and it's free. Absolutely free just to talk to them. So if you are that person, call them, explain your situation or that of a friend and see how they can help you. Trust me, this is the first step to getting everything going. And this 10% off deal right now through the 4th of July is your sign. So give them a call, 1-800-958-1000 or better yet, give them go to the website, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer. All one word, no spaces, tnusa.com/Sean Spicer, all one word, 10%, all those services up through the 4th of July. This is your sign. Help someone out. All right, speaking of the 4th of July, if you're going to be outside grilling, I have the best gift for you. Riverbend Ranch steaks and hot dogs and ground beef and beef jerky. I had this a couple weeks ago, 2 weekends ago now. Grilled it. The family was like, where did you get these steaks? My kids went nuts for the hot dogs. I might have eaten 2 of the hot dogs myself. They are amazing. I'm talking better than you've had in any restaurant, something you cannot get in the grocery store. This is the kind of stuff. 35 years Riverbend Ranch has been in the business of creating the most tender, marble-filled steaks. I had the ribeye, the New York strip. I cooked one of the filet mignons. Oh my goodness. And then, as I said, I had the hot dogs too, because I cooked them for the kids and I had to try them myself. If you're a hot dog lover, these things are mind-blowing, by the way. I don't care what people say about hot dogs. But the steaks, holy smokes. These guys raise their cattle with no hormone, growth hormones or antibiotics. This is the stuff that you cannot get in a restaurant. It is MAHA approved red meat, and it tastes amazing. It's much healthier. They pasture raise their cattle in beautiful mountains and meadows in Montana and Wyoming. They handle their animals humanely and with respect. And I'm telling you, you can't buy any beef like this in a grocery store. Go to riverbendranch.com. Use promo code Sean to get $20 off. Riverbendranch.com. Use promo code Sean. You will love me for this. This is amazing. This is where I get my steaks from now, too. Without further ado, I want to bring in the former Chief of Staff of the White House, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Spacey, happy to be here.
Well, look, it's Friday, so let's have some fun here. But yesterday, Karoline Leavitt says the president still expects the big, beautiful bill on his desk by July 4th. You, aside from being former White House Chief of Staff, are also a former member of Congress. I know how you guys love your recesses, and so you can laugh now because you couldn't back then. But the truth is, Thune wants to keep the Senate in. They hit some hiccups yesterday. The parliamentarian basically says, hey, look, all these savings that you thought you came up with, I don't agree with. I'm going to knock a lot of that out. So give us just the 30, let's take it down to 25,000 feet view. Where does this go from here timeline-wise, realistically?
Well, let's assume for the sake of this discussion that the parliamentarian hasn't thrown a major monkey wrench into things, right? And they can live with her changes. We'll talk about that maybe separately if you want to. But if things sort of go per plan, the Senate would pass something, I don't know, Sunday, Monday, and the House would try to force it through as quickly as they possibly can. With every day that the Senate slides to the right, the chances of passing things before the 4th go down because the House really wants to go on vacation. And again, the 4th of July deadline is a made-up deadline. It's a Trump deadline. It's not a hard deadline. The bill is going to count just as much passing it on the 11th of July as it does on the 4th of July. Still, they want to get it done. So if the Senate moves quickly, and you and I both know there's a lot of things the Senate doesn't do, and one of them is move quickly. But if they do, you might still be able to get it passed by the 4th.
Okay, but then let's take it down maybe to 10,000 feet, which is basically considering all of the issues that are at stake. Additional savings, the overall cost. I mean, we had Ron Johnson on the show this week. He's very concerned about overall cost. He wants to go provision by provision. Then you've got the folks that care about Medicare. You've got some of these nut jobs, on our own side, that are worried about cuts to public broadcasting. They don't like getting rid of. Okay, all that being said, the Senate can give up 3 votes, right? And then J.D. Vance could break the tie. So right now, I count at least 7, 8 real senators that have real problems. Let's call it 5. You're still too short. So just let's focus on step 1 first. Can Thune actually get it through the Senate in the next 4 or 5 days? Huh?
Yes, he can. We had Ron Johnson on News Nation here the other day, where I know you and I both do some work. And I heard his language. I saw his body language. I think he's trying to figure out a way to vote for it. And I think there's a bunch of Republicans like that. I think the Senate passes something by, say, Tuesday of next week. If the Senate passes, then the question is, does it go to conference between the House and the Senate, or does the House eat it and just vote for whatever the Senate passes? I talked to folks in the White House. They think the House is going to absolutely take whatever the Senate sends them.
So, okay, then you're settling a bet that I have with Mark Halperin, because we talk about the C word, the conference. I don't think there's a formal one where they sit down and appoint conferees, but they get together in a room and Thune says to Johnson, I can give you that if you give me that. Yeah. Do you think that's realistic? Or in your words, you saying they're sending it over, jamming the House?
Yeah. I think what you've just described, sort of the informal conference, is already happened and is happening as you and I have this conversation. They're sort of pre-conferencing as they go. There's been pretty good communication, give them credit, between Thune and Michael Johnson's office. So they are communicating now. And essentially, whatever they come back to the basic principle that I think the White House told me, whatever passes the Senate is what the House will vote on, and it will pass out of the House.
All right, so you were a founding member of the Freedom Caucus. These guys are not happy with the deficit reduction measures that the Senate's passing, which are less than they originally bought off for. And just to put the first House passage vote in context, if Jerry Conley from Virginia hadn't died, it would have been a tie vote, right? I mean, that's how close this was. And so my point is, I get this notion we're going to jam the House, but put yourself back into the shoes of Congressman Mick Mulvaney, Freedom Caucus founder, and say, would you eat this bill?
Yeah, I could do better than that. I can go into the shoes of the guy that replaced me, Ralph Norman, who's getting a little bit of attention this week because he's a member of the Freedom Caucus. He says he doesn't want to, he doesn't like the spending, et cetera, et cetera. But look at the context, Sean. He's running for governor. He's already sort of worn out a little bit of his welcome with Donald Trump because he supported Nikki Haley very long into the presidential primary in 2024. Do you think you can run in a Republican primary in South Carolina for governor without the support of Donald J. Trump?
No. Okay,
no,
so there's Ralph Norman. Okay, so what about Andy Harris? Harris.
I think the guys that I think Massey's going to be a no. I think Chip Roy is going to be difficult because I think Chip Roy really is driven by philosophy and ideology, and I respect that about him. And one of the reasons I like him so much, I think Andy might be the same. I don't know how much deeper it is beneath that. I come back to what the White House told me. They think they've got more influence over the House than they do over the Senate. I think that's probably right. I think Donald Trump's influence in a Republican primary, which is really where his power is politically, is much more effective in the House than it is in the Senate. And they feel like they can whip the House more than they can whip the Senate.
All right, so you got, those are the hardliners, the Freedom Caucus guys. Your Tom Massey is probably a no, but you're right. And then you got the Ralph Norman, the Chip Roy. Okay. But let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Side. The SALT Caucus, the people who care about the state and local deduction. Mike Lawler, Elise Stefanik, Tom Keene from New Jersey, Nicole Malliotakis from New York, Young Kim, David Valadao of California. There's 5, and I'm probably not hitting them all.
I think there's two things that could happen. Number one, they got $40,000 of cap in the House bill. I sort of got the feeling when they picked that number, Sean, that they were willing to accept something around 30, that they got Johnson to go up from 20 or 30 to 40 because they knew they'd have to give something back to the Senate. That's one possibility, that they might eat 30,000 or whatever the Senate comes up with that's less than 40. They say they won't, but there's another wrinkle that would still allow them to vote yes, which is the Senate. I've heard they've started to play with the caps, the means testing for when that 40,000 phases out. So there's a circumstance you can foresee where the Senate leaves the $40,000 cap in, but takes it away from the super wealthy and still applies that cap up there. So there's a chance there.
Listen, I'm a big fan of gimmicks. This isn't even the super wealthy. It's like, if you have 2 hands, you can't use the deduction. I mean, they're going to say that it's in there, and then they're going to basically say, if you make more than $200,000, you have 1 kid and a dog. They're going to find a way to, what they call it, means test it and all that stuff.
Are you telling me that they use gimmicks in the House and the Senate? Come on now.
No, and the Senate. Yeah, I mean, you should know because you fought against most of them.
Yeah, I also know how to do it. So anyway.
So let's talk broader though for a second, because part of the Freedom Caucus and so many of these people, Ron Johnson and some of these other guys, Chip Roy, are concerned about the budget, the deficit, the debt.
Yeah.
And I talked to Ron Johnson extensively about this as late as this week and for months before that. Is this just should we just stop pretending Republicans give a crap about the deficit and the debt?
No, not on an individual basis. Those guys are sincere. They really are. Look, I know Ron as well as you do. I know Chip probably as well as you do. These people there's folks in the House and the Senate who actually do care about spending. The problem is at some point they come to realize they're a minority within the Republican Party. And you listen, if I wanted the bill to pass, if I'm in leadership and I need the bill to pass, or I'm in the White House, I need the bill to pass, I go to Chip Roy, I say, Chip, look, I get it. You care about spending. I care about spending, but we're in the minority. All right. We're never going to get the spending things we want to because the party simply isn't there. Republicans generally like to spend money as much as Democrats do. So here's your choice. You vote no on the bill, it fails, and taxes go up, and they're going to figure out a way to spend the money anyway, which is true. Or you vote yes on the bill, you do get the spending, you get less spending than you were going to get anyway, so it's better than the other bill, and the taxes don't go up. So I mean that's the logic I think you try and pitch to the guys who really believe about it. So I don't want to defame Ron Johnson, Chip Roy, those guys. They really do care about spending, but they're in a very, very small minority of the party.
On the Medicaid front, there's a lot of people. I don't even know where I'd say they're from, but there's a lot of people who are saying Republicans are going to be vulnerable on the Medicaid stuff, despite the fact that I've shown chart after chart of the fact that we are going to spend almost $660 billion more over the next 5 years. That's not a cut. Are Republicans vulnerable politically on things like that? And what do they need to do message-wise?
No, they're not. They think that they're, look, we hated Medicaid expansion and Medicaid subsidies and so forth when we were in the minority and they were part of Obamacare. Now we seem to like them and think we can't win an election without keeping them. That's so frustrating to me, but I get it. Every district is a little bit different. I go back, Sean, to 2000. I think it was 2012. I was in the House running for my very first reelect, and we had the Ryan budget had proposed some real cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, not Social Security, but Medicare, Medicaid, and we had to run against these ads of Paul Ryan pushing a granny over the cliff. That's what the Democrats ran against us. People don't realize this. We won the 65 and over cohort in the 2012 election. We did great with older Americans because they know the systems are broken. They know the systems need to be fixed. There's a messaging out there where you could go to people and say, look, we're not really kicking anybody off the system. Making people work is not really that draconian. It's probably a 75% issue. There's great things you could do here in Medicaid and in Social Security and in Medicare that are popular. But we allow ourselves to pay too much attention to CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times, and we believe their press, and we lose our will. And that's really, really disappointing sometimes.
So let's play this out for 1 second. Let's just say hypothetically whether it's July 4th or July 11th, because I agree with you on the date. It's somewhat sooner rather than later is my answer, but I don't think that anyone should get all strung up because it's not July 4th. When that's done, we still have 3.5 years of Trump. Mm-hmm. From your perch as former White House Chief of Staff, Donald Trump comes to you and says, hey, Chief of Staff, we got the big, beautiful bill done. Now what? What's the next thing they should put on that agenda?
Yeah, there's going to be, I would give him two general answers. Mr. President, let's find those 65, 75% issues out there. We know that there are some deporting illegal criminals. For example, the Democrats who were all against deporting criminals back in the election of 2024 are now actually saying publicly that everybody agrees to deport criminals. So what can we do there? What can we do on the other issues that really do speak to a broader swath of the country? Don't know what some of those might be, but let's go find those. And secondly, Mr. President, aside from those couple of handful of issues, we're not going to get much passed legislatively. What can we do to sort of ramp up and supercharge our efforts at the administrative level, at the executive agency level? What can they do at Department of Transportation to help the country? What can they do at Department of Education to help the country? Keep in mind, these folks have been working really hard since they got here, and a lot of the work you do on deregulatory measures take 12 or 14 or 18 months to kick in. So there's going to be some real opportunities as soon as this is finished to focus attention on the regulatory actions at the executive levels. That's what I'd be telling them to focus on.
All right, let's get there. Congressman, former White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend and have a great 4th of July if I don't see you before then.
You too. Thanks, Sean.
You bet. All right, guys, great conversation with Mick Mulvaney. This is a conversation about the media with Professor Alberto Martinez that you will not see anywhere else. His book is called The Media Vs The Apprentice. Take a listen. Professor Martinez, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Sean. I'm happy to be here.
You know, I got to tell you, I don't even remember how I found your book. It was a couple of years ago, and I've been reading it off and on. And anyone who knows when I've had different authors on can tell the quality of a book by the dog ears. And I know you're a professor down there in Texas, but there were so many. I think there are more pages that I dog-eared than I didn't. So just for the audience, and I think I said this at the beginning, you have traditionally not been a big fan of President Trump, correct?
That's right.
Okay. you voted, I believe, in the 2016 cycle for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Okay.
But basically, he wasn't running, and he didn't make it, of course, to
Right.
the.
But I just want to establish
Yeah.
you are not out there some Trump. Okay.
Yeah.
But this.
I'll say, for example, that I've donated money to Bernie Sanders. Sure.
Okay. Fair enough. But you wrote a book which I found just captivating about the reality of what some of the key narratives have been against Donald Trump and the reality. Correct?
That's right. Yeah.
And why did you want to do this?
Well, what happened originally in my case was I was working on other stuff on history of science. And as I was working, I would be watching the news. And as I'm watching the news, I saw that the same kind of speech patterns of exaggerations, misrepresentations, and fiction were showing up in the news media. For example, when somebody says, Donald Trump suggested, if he didn't say it, he didn't say it. So they're trying to see how do I capture that he implied it and he must have meant it because we know what a deranged person he is. And then they talk about dog whistles. So it became very frustrating. I wrote an article. It got 17,000 shares in Salon back then about Trump and Mexicans. That encouraged me to write more articles, but then it turned out that nobody would publish them. And then eventually I had enough. I said, well, let me put it out as a book.
But so I want to get into a couple of these examples because it's so funny. Every time I say something, people will be like, oh, that's just not true. And when I read your book, and I wish at the time I remembered, because somebody said to me, you got to read this guy's book because he's not a fan of Trump, but he's just more about pursuing the truth and wants to have more of an honest debate about facts as opposed to, and so I thought, because right off the bat, this is one that was interesting, and this goes back, there was this meme that says, Trump rudely called Ariana Huffington a dog, and everybody took it as this massive insult.
Yeah.
And you go do the legwork to say, you know what, that's not, like, it wasn't like he singled out Ariana Huffington.
Yeah, there was a reporter in another magazine or news magazine who said, I think this was in the New York Times, and it came up again and again. We'd have to look up exactly who it was, but she said that Trump once sent her a letter saying the face of a dog. And this story ran in media after media after media. When the elections happened and she won, she decided to actually dig up the sheet of paper that Trump had written about her. And it didn't say, you have the face of a dog. It said a dog and a liar. Now, what's interesting is if we take these two insults, the one that I'm talking about and the one you mentioned about Ariana Huffington by themselves, it sounds that Donald Trump is an abusive misogynist who likes to demean and belittle professional women for no reason, because it's been given without context. But if you look at the context, you see that again and again, the people who were criticizing him the people who he's criticizing had criticized him again and again and again. Ariana Huffington was running the Huffington Post as if its goal were to destroy this man. So eventually he calls her, she's a dog. Well, guess what? She too had used that expression. Countless people use that expression against each other because these are normal words. In other words, the media likes to hyperventilate over words that are grade school words like you're silly, you're dumb, you're dopey, you're a dog, you're lazy, you're a slob, you're fat, you're little Marco Rubio. I mean, Trump used countless words. When you put them all together, you're nasty, you're rude. These are grade school insults. So Trump, I think, thought that he had some latitude to use these kinds of insults against people. Now, the weirder dimension that you may have seen in my book is when one actually says, okay, he used those insults towards women. What did he say towards men? And there we go. The attacks, the verbal insults that he had for countless people, from Jeb Bush to Rand Paul to many countless white males, were far worse. For example, he said that Senator Rand Paul doesn't have the right gene. He said that Rick Perry should be forced to take an IQ test before he's allowed to debate. Imagine if Trump had said that about a woman or a black person. It would be the end of civilization. But because he said it about a white man, then nobody cared. It was completely invisible.
But also, like, to your point, okay, if he's going to call him a dog, this is on page 54 of your book. Trump wrote, Mitt Romney had his chance to beat a failed president, but he choked like a dog. He wrote that Ted Cruz lies like a dog. He wrote that Brent Pozell came over to my office begging for money like a dog. Trump said that Glenn Beck got fired like a dog. He said that Chuck Todd, sleepy eyes Chuck Todd, will be fired like a... Well, he actually was right. Chuck Todd did get fired like a dog. But the point is that, like, he says the same thing about everybody, and you're right. What I thought was so fascinating is the way you document it in the book, because they take this one insult and be like, oh my God, he's talking about a professional woman. And it's like, no, he says the same thing about everybody. He's an equal opportunity offender.
Yeah, he got into a huge controversy because he was upset about how Judge Gonzalo Curiel, who is Hispanic, was handling one of the court cases against him. So he said Curiel is very hostile. He is very biased, and a couple other words. People use that as evidence. Here he is. Trump is racist against Hispanics. So of course I'm Hispanic. I'm happy to get upset if someone is being racist towards Hispanics. But take, for example, what Trump said about Rand Paul. He said at one point that Rand Paul doesn't have a properly functioning brain. Now I like Rand Paul. I'm not trying to take hits on Rand. I think Rand Paul, personally, I think Rand Paul is a valuable member of the Senate. So more power to him. But again and again, sometimes he had some encounters. Sometimes he's been more friendly with Trump. It doesn't matter. What matters is objectively, that is a worse insult than saying that someone has been hostile or is a hater. Trump said Judge Curiel is a hater. Okay, maybe Trump is wrong, but that is not a racist insult. That's not what that is. Trump is upset about, whatever it was, the handling of Trump University or whatever it was. But to get to the point, I mean, at some point, what I realize is the media cares, the current media, part of its failure is it cares 1,000 times more about words than reality. That's why you see them eagerly on the edge of their seats, trying to see how do they dissect and prove that when Trump said totally obliterated, it's not really 100%, it's 98% or 79%. In other words, they're not as concerned that, say, 14 or 12 bombs, 360,000 pounds of ordnance has been dropped. That is not as interesting as a word. Similarly, and the way I can prove this, because of course, what I discovered, sadly, is most people just, it's Trump derangement syndrome is true. It's hardly possible to have a conversation anymore. But to try to make my point, to try to prove it, if I were in court trying to prove the media cares more about words, they care more about Twitter than bombs, they care more about True Social than bombs. When Trump was running for president in 2016, and it seemed like civilization is ending because every random tweet he said, Obama bombed 7 countries, 26,172 bombs in 7 countries: Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Pakistan, Lebanon. Is it Lebanon? Somalia, Yemen, and whatever. You get Libya. This was widely reported. Did it generate as much concern as whenever Trump said a word? Of course not. Of course not. And it becomes mysterious. Why? Why are they so offended? So one possible answer is, well, Trump's not a lawyer. And people are used to lawyers lying to their faces. So long as it's Obama and he talks in a monotone corporate way, that's very welcome because that's representative of our civilization. But if it's Trump, and he's using grade school playground insults, it is grossly unacceptable and it is unbecoming a president, and it is a threat to our democracy. So to me, it was just shocking. It's like an objective discovery. These people are more agitated by words. And why do I say this? I say this because in 2016, Trump is not a president. He's not a politician. He's merely a candidate. So that media was getting agitated about words. Did they care so much? When 240,000 Black Americans lost their homes and their mortgages during the Obama financial crisis? No, they didn't. They didn't mind. That was like, well, there's nothing we can do. I mean, it's so sad, but, we got to give the money to Goldman Sachs. We got to give the money to Citigroup. We got to give Citi $1 trillion. We got to do. So there's something tragic, but there's also something comical, because the degree to which the media refuses to accept what they're doing is just astonishing. Normal people on the street know it, but people at CNN and the New York Times are blissfully unaware of how ineffective they've been at just conveying the facts. And you know it. I mean, you describe the things in your book. I mean,
look at that! Thank you.
Here's a plug for your book. When you, and it's a very good book because one can really empathize with your lifelong vocation to serve your country, and not just in the Navy, but at this moment you're in the White House and you're trying to do your best for the president, and every little thing. I remember when the thing about the crowds happened. Now, I had been writing my articles, and suddenly I was like, yeah, there's something weird in how the media is trying to portray the framing. You had to go up and try to make your case. And of course, it doesn't matter if you're wrong in some instances and right in others. We're all humans. What matters is that you neatly pinpoint, in this case, ABC News suspended such and such for reporting XYZ. Like you go one by one about the number of times that these people made gross mistakes. I mean, of course, the Steele dossier. In other words, people can dislike Trump, but if only the media were not trying to portray him relentlessly as if he's Adolf Hitler. He isn't. Yeah. It's just, I mean, the relentlessness of it. How many times in my life, since I was, who knows, in the 1980s, I had, Reagan said something to Gorbachev. Some reporters were saying, this is just like 1933. They were afraid. Were they there 1933, 1938, or 1939? How many times? And over what? It's always over words. And that's very strange.
So the thing that's so interesting when you say this, because I absolutely agree with your analysis here, but I always think that Trump learned it from them. And here's what I mean by that. When you turn on a morning show, right? So the Today Show, ABC, whatever, how does it normally start? They'll say something like this: the story everyone in America is listening to, the story that's captivated the country. And half the time, like Tara Reid, what's her name? Karen Reid the other day, I still don't even know what that trial was about. And every morning that I would get on the morning shows, they'd say the trial that everyone in America is talking about. And I'm like, that's simply not true. So when they exaggerate, it's okay. When Trump exaggerates, he's perpetrating a falsehood. And it's funny because they are okay doing it if they're pushing a story because they want ratings or viewers. But when Trump does it, that's wrong.
Yeah. So why are they so angry at him? My guess is that my impression, and as you saw in my book, so I analyze. For people who don't know it, the book is titled The Media Vs The Apprentice, The Devil, Mr. Trump. Why? Because Trump was being demonized. So I analyzed 19 or 20 news stories, from the Muslim ban to the Muslim database to did the KKK endorse Trump, all these things. And I go over each of them. And it was shocking. I didn't know what would happen. Fine, maybe 10% or 20% of the media stories would be wrong. Nearly all of them are just wrong. I mean, the degree to which they'll make a story from whole cloth. In one case, for example, there was this terrible story that came out on Super Tuesday, which is Trump refused to disavow David Duke and the KKK.
I love that one in the book. Oh, that's, to me, that's one of my favorite. I learned so much when I read this chapter about David. I didn't believe it to begin with, but then when I read how you did all the background about this. That guy had been disavowing David Duke since he was approached for the Reform Party nominee. Your chronicling of this is unreal.
Yeah. And that's the degree to which one says this is beyond dishonesty. It is a level of incompetence that it would be unacceptable. I don't know, maybe in a journalism class, because to summarize that story for your viewers, here we have, it's going to be Super Tuesday. Jake Tapper sits on CNN with Trump and says, well, there are these groups and there's David Duke, he endorsed you. And Trump replies, look, I don't know anything about David Duke. I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about these people. You keep asking me about these people, but I don't know anything about these people. The news then came out that Trump refused to disavow. In other words, it looked like Jake Tapper simply wanted one thing from Trump, which is, will you say the sentence, I disavow David Duke? What the media relentlessly refused to report is that Trump literally had said, I disavow on February 25 of 2016, and in a separate press conference in February 26 of 2016. In other words, he disavowed twice, and the third time they asked him, he's disavowed at a press conference, he's disavowed to Katie Tur of NBC. Jake Tapper asked him again, and now Trump is just flustered. I don't know anything about these.
But hold on. This is page 176. 1991. Yeah. 1991. Larry King on CNN asked Donald Trump, did the David Duke thing bother you? 1991. Trump is saying, yes, he bothered me. I don't like this guy. Da, da, da. And then here he is 25 years later, and Jake Tapper saying, did you disavow? You literally lay out in this like 5 times over the course of 20 years where he's literally saying, I understand, David Duke, I don't like him. Actually, here we go. Just so we're clear, actually, I take that back. In 2015, over and over again, he is asked about David Duke over a 20-year period, saying, I don't like this guy. The Reform Party now includes a Klansman, da-da-da-da. And this is him saying, Trump, this is back in the 90s, and actually February 2000, this is not company I wish to keep. 20 years he's disavowing the guy. And then Jake Tapper, to your point, says, hey, will you disavow him now?
Yeah. So the sum of the numbers, so your students or so your listeners can get the overall. Trump disavowed, I quote, 55 separate times David Duke and the KKK, and the media story was Trump refuses to disavow, declined to disavow, or disavowed only late. He took some time before he did. I mean, they had different approaches to try to convince you. Why was that shocking to me? Because I remember when Trump considered running for president for the Reform Party. And who did he want for vice president? That was on the cover of newspapers. He said, I want Oprah Winfrey. How the heck can you now say that he's a friend of the KKK when he wants a black woman to run for him?
Not only that, Professor, in this book, you document going way back, decades, when Jesse Jackson in the Rainbow Coalition, Trump gives Jesse Jackson office space for free in 40 Wall Street. You talk about
40 Wall Street is a Trump building. In other words, Jesse Jackson has a fair complaint, which is affirmative action hiring, equal employment opportunity has not yet reached Wall Street because most of the traders are white. Trump agrees, and he shows his commitment to Jesse by giving him floor space. Now, this is a time when Jesse Jackson was still being arrested for civil rights actions. A few months later, he's in jail. And where are his office spaces? On 40 Trump building. And that the media refused relentlessly to say any of these stories. Maya Angelou celebrated her 80th birthday, hosted by Oprah Winfrey. Where? At Mar-a-Lago. Mar-a-Lago was not KKK Central in the 1990s, or that's not what it was.
Wait, hold on. Explain, just so we're clear, explain how Mar-a-Lago gets founded.
Exactly. So what the media refused to remind viewers was that when Trump tries to open a social club in Palm Beach, nearly all the social clubs were anti-Semitic. They openly rejected enrollment or membership from Jewish people. Openly, blatantly, it was a haven of anti-Semitism, and they were racist. They wouldn't let black people join. So Mar-a-Lago
or Jews.
Yeah, Jews or black people. Mar-a-Lago opens as a social club where black and Jewish people are welcome. And Trump said they're all welcome, and he ended up suing the city of Palm Beach. He sent over this issue because they were treating him poorly. He sent the movie Look Who's Coming to Dinner to these people because it's a movie about, I think it's a woman bringing a black guy that she might marry or something. So I mean, it was just astonishing that after decades of friendships, and in other words, the Democrats were friendly to Donald Trump. He was just another guy who supported them. He gave more money to Charles Rangel. I think he's a representative for New York who's a black man.
He was the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee.
Countless times donating money to a black man. Which KKK member does that? So we were expected as viewers in a 1984 Orwellian manner to forget everything from the friendship with boxers to the friendship with Michael Jackson, all of it, the friendship with Oprah, let's forget all of it and just accept that Trump is an ally of David Duke. It was astonishing. And that's why I ended up writing the book. But I'll tell you now, here's the kicker, something you don't know because it's not in the book. Do people want to hear this? Of course not. When my book was being written, I created a website and I put most of the chapters in draft versions. It turned out that if you went on Google, and I have screenshots on it, and you wrote the Media Versus The Apprentice on Google, what Google would give you would be the first 3 hits. After each of these hits, it says Ku Klux Klan. Now, bear in mind, there was one article that discussed the Ku Klux Klan. Almost every article did not. And this is shadow banning of the most grotesque sort. What they did to stop these kinds of analyses from making it to be visible in Amazon searches was grotesque and disgusting. And that's, of course, why you generally didn't see me. I mean, a few people interview me like Cheryl Atkinson, but generally it's impossible to see because it just doesn't fit the media narrative that they want, which is it is 1933 again, and a new Hitler has arisen. A Hitler who, mind you, years ago was discussed by Bibi Netanyahu as the greatest ally of Israel. Humans are supposed to simultaneously believe that Bibi is a good friend of Trump, a great ally of Israel, and Hitler, who hated the Jews and finished them in concentration. It's unbelievable that this happens, and that it happens in broad daylight, in CNN, in the New York Times, in the Washington Post. It is shameful. It is inappropriate to our country, and I don't know what can be done, but someday somebody should convince them.
I will tell you, I honestly, like I said, I can't even remember how I stumbled upon your book. But I'm glad I did. I've been waiting to find the right time. This week was perfect with everything that's going on with the New York Times and CNN over the reporting of the intelligence. The last thing I just want to ask you, though, is as a guy, when I read your book, and the reason I wanted to establish your bona fides at the beginning, because you aren't a Trump guy, but you're committed to the truth and want to fight things out, I think, on a pure policy basis. That's my take anyway. When you do this as somebody on a college campus, among your colleagues and other students, do they walk up to you and say, Professor Martinez, what are you doing trying to make this guy seem like a normal guy? Like we're supposed to not like him? How have you been treated and what's your response?
The response is generally silence. In other words, again, these are just not welcome topics. I'm not invited to discuss this. People don't tell me, shame on you for your book. Nobody said that. Instead, they do not, professors who know I wrote this book do not say, let's talk about your book about Trump. What do you mean? I haven't read it, but what's going on? Nearly none of them. In other words, it's a kind of silence. And as you may know, recently, the Republicans have been taking over the University of Texas at Austin. In other words, there is a real phenomenon that Democrats are slightly unaware of, which is, for a long time, many Republicans, especially students, have not felt that they have free speech on campus. I'll give you one example. Trump has been in politics 10 consecutive years. In those 10 consecutive years, I have not seen a Make America Great Again hat on campus a single time in a red state. Imagine the degree to which the Republicans are scared of the Democrats. They literally think that Antifa will beat them up, or that a professor will give them an F. So the Republicans have gradually been saying, look, we're Republicans, we want to take over the state. I'm not for that. I'm not for the Republican takeover. But what I'm saying is the Republicans are responding to a true phenomenon. So, in my case, a professor writes a book that says, hey, the media really is lying. The media really says things that are grossly misleading and that are almost terroristic. Because again, it's really hard for people to sleep if you convince them that we have reached the beginning of Nazi Germany again. It's very difficult. I've had Hispanic friends tell me that they're afraid of being deported to a concentration camp. We're talking about citizens. US-born citizens are afraid that they're going to go to a concentration camp. So I thought I would write this book and that my audience would be mainly Democrats who would discover, yes, we don't like Trump. Yes, we disagree with his policies, but he's quite similar to the other things we've seen, which is he's a president trying to do his job. Yeah. He's not someone trying to kill everybody. That's just not a reality. This is not... let me give one last footnote to your viewers, just so that, because again, what I wish, if there were Democrats watching your show, what I would want to give is give them an example of the reassurance that I mean. The media nowadays is portraying these horrible moments when, of course, Trump's agents are deporting and capturing Hispanic people who have illegally entered the U.S. I feel for that. I'm upset by that. But there is a numerical issue that the media will never report, which is how many people did Obama, Clinton, and Biden deport? Can they just? So what they do is, if you try to go to the Department of Homeland Security, they don't have a table that says deportation, because that's really a politician's word. It's a news people's word. What they have is Table 39. It's issued almost every year. It's about returns and removals. Removal is with a court order. Return is without a court order. And in 2020, a new category was created, which is expulsions. Expulsions, in the form by which we remove you, we say, well, for health concerns like COVID. During 2020, when Trump is still president, the number of expulsions is around 200,000. When Biden is president, the number of expulsions is over 1 million each year. So when you add all categories, returns, removals, expulsions, Biden was taking out of the country 1.2 million people per year, while Trump only removed about 500,000 per year. Why can't the media portray that? Because when I'm being removed from a country, it really doesn't matter to me what you write on the form, whether it's that A, B, C, or D. What matters is I wanted to stay in America, and you're telling me that I have to go out. Similarly, Trump removed roughly 500,000 per year. Obama removed 656,000 per year, clearly more than Trump. Yeah. Bill Clinton removed more than Obama and then Biden. Now I'll get to the kicker. Why cannot this be reported? The Democrats can't report it because if they report it, they confess that Trump is not the big demonic bugbear that they need. The Republicans cannot report it because if they report it, then it sounds as if Trump is weak on immigration. Neither of those things are the issue. The issue, I would guess, is that when you have open borders, suppose if it's true that Biden lets 10 million people in, all you have to do is reject 1 out of every 10 or 1 out of every 5 that are coming in. And as you do that, you're going to rack up a huge number. So in other words, if one could just look at the numerical stats, unemployment under Trump in 2019 September and in 2020 February before COVID, what was it? It was 3.5. 3.5 is the lowest unemployment in 50 years. This is not a political point. This is not saying I like Trump. This is just it's a fact. Reality. So it's shocking to me that nevertheless the media needs hysteria. Yeah. And in my book, you see, I'll explain, well, this is because it's in their professional discipline to exaggerate.
Anyway, Professor, I commend this to everybody, the media and The Apprentice. I loved it. Thank you for spending so much time with us. I definitely have to have you back because I appreciated your time and the conversation.
Happy to be here. Be well. Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for being with us, guys. Have a great weekend. Remember, my latest newsletter is up at SeanSpicer.com. I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.